I know. I just covered this in my last episode, but I really want to spend more time learning and discussing what exactly climate change is. So for this episode, I'm going to be speaking with an expert. I mean, it kind of makes sense to learn about climate change from people who have dedicated their lives to science and the study of climate here on Earth, right? So today, we're going to visit the Royal Ontario Museum and speak with Dr. Soren Brothers and take a tour of history to learn about climate on Earth and discuss its impacts. This is going to be so much fun. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go learn about our climate. Woohoo! Welcome to the Royal Ontario Museum. Hello, Dr. Brothers. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Pleased to meet you, Davis.
Thanks so much for spending time with me today, teaching me about our climate.
So this is the first stop on the tour, and we're going to be focusing on these. Any thoughts on what these would be, and what these are?
Rocks.
So they look like rocks right now, but they were actually billions of years ago. They were living animals, living organisms that were growing and oozing, kind of adding one layer at a time as they grew. They're called stromatolites. You can see the layers that were in there. And they were the first organisms on the entire planet that learned how to eat the sun.
Eat the sun?
Yeah, they eat sunlight. And it was about over 3 billion years ago, or roughly 3 billion years ago, they evolved a way to eat the sun and turn it into their bodies. And when they did that, what they did is they released this toxic gas into the water around them that killed a lot of stuff, and it kind of turned all these things into rust. We have this layers of red rust. That toxic gas was oxygen. Oxygen didn't exist in the planet's atmosphere at this time, in the air. And now we breathe oxygen. And that eating the sun, that was called photosynthesis. So now that's what every plant does. You know, plants need sunlight and they eat the sun to get it. But this was the first thing that was able to do that. And when they released oxygen into the air, and they took up what's called carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide, the local Ojibwe name for it, is the air that trees breathe. So you can think of that. This is what plants, and these are called a kind of blue-green algae. They were taking it up, and they made the world a lot colder when they took it up. So 2 billion years ago, 3 billion years ago. It kind of was like taking a blanket off of the Earth's air, and it led to this whole sort of global ice sort of cooling event. So the whole Earth became colder. Almost all of the life on Earth, about 99% of it, disappeared because it got so cold, just because these had figured out how to eat the sunlight. And the good side of it is that when that oxygen ended up leaving the oceans, it actually created what we have is called an ozone layer. It made it possible for any animals and plants to leave the ocean and to go onto the Earth and onto land. So they actually kind of freed the way, and they made it for us. There's the oxygen bubbles leaving in the image, and it made it possible for us to breathe. So our ancestors ended up being able to use that oxygen to breathe. So you have this kind of really scary event happening 3 billion years ago that ended up being pretty good for life on Earth and for us.
What was this chemical makeup before the oxygen?
We had atmosphere was actually very rich in a gas called methane, and methane is really good at holding on to the sun's warmth. So it kept the Earth a lot warmer, but the oxygen got rid of that methane.
You mean like Uranus and Neptune?
I don't know. That might be the case. This is the kind of cells that we evolved from and that we have in our bodies. So it has a center, it's a nucleus. And it was actually this whole global ice age event that made this apparently possible.
Nucleus?
The nucleus, that's this. This is where our DNA is.
The DNA is.
So that's the first stop. So what does this look like to you?
A rock.
Does it look like a rock? Do you see most rocks in your backyard that have this shape?
No?
What do you think it could have been before it was a rock?
I don't know.
Maybe part of a tree?
I think so.
Yeah, so this was the base of basically an early ancestor of trees. And if, as you walk through this gallery to get from that 3 billion years ago little colony, that rock, to here, we've gone forward through time. So this is now at this point, plants have evolved and trees have evolved. And at this time, just by a weird chance, a lot of the world was really swampy. And it was covered in these sort of wet tropical swamps, just like the ones with the pictures here, with lots of animals. And trees were taking that. Remember the air that trees breathe, this carbon dioxide. So these trees were taking that out of the air, and they made the world really cold again. They stored it in these swamps, and they stored it in the earth. And have you ever heard of coal?
Oh, yeah, I know coal. Trains run on coal.
Exactly. So most of the coal in the world is from these trees that died, that grew at this time in Earth's history, 400 million years ago almost, over 300 million years ago. So super, super long time ago. And that's almost all the coal that we have around the planet comes from this time. And it's kind of a nice thing. So it actually made the planet colder again when all of these trees grew and they took that carbon dioxide from the air. So we have this cooling event, but now we ended up being able to use that coal for energy, for electricity, for running trains around the world. But it's just kind of from this random coincidence that all of these trees were growing at this time. Do you know what this is? What this animal is?
A polar bear.
Yeah. And do you know where they live?
In the Arctic.
In the Arctic, far north, in a cold place. And when we talked in that last stop about coal and burning coal, and remember how all of that coal was made? It made, when it was formed, it made the earth a lot colder.
Yeah.
Now when we burn it, it's making the earth warmer again. And how do you think that would change the polar bear's life, being warmer?
I don't know.
So what do polar bears live on? They live on ice. And what
Yeah.
happens when when the planet gets warm, or when things get warm? What happens to ice?
It melts.
Yeah. So it changes the environment. And so having a cold environment that we have, for instance, in the Arctic in Canada, we can see that it's changing with the warming. And so that warming from burning coal, burning all of that old stuff, is now creating a situation that's not really good for animals and for people. And so this is where now we're trying to figure out how to respond to that and how to stop burning coal so that they can actually keep on living their lives and hunting seals on ice. So for instance, polar bears, they like to hunt seals, and one of the best ways to do that is to go to places where seals go to breathe on the ice. So they spend a lot of the winters going out to these little holes where the seals breathe. But if the ice is gone, they have to stay on the shore, and it's not that easy to get to where the seals are breathing. So it changes the way that they have to live.
Oh, that's because the CO2 chemical balance is off.
Right. So more CO2 in the atmosphere is making the world warmer, and that changes how much ice there is in the Arctic. And it changes a lot of things all around the world, everywhere you live. All right. Do you know what this is called?
No?
That's called copper.
Copper.
Yeah. And so you remember we were talking about how people are trying to find ways to not burn coal so that we can keep the world from getting warmer, right? So one of the ways that we're doing that is to try and get energy from different ways, electricity from different ways that don't involve burning coal. So when I was young, when your dad was young, here in Ontario, coal was one of the main ways that we had electricity. Every time we turned on our lights, that was because we were burning coal. And we stopped doing that here about 10 or 15 years ago. So before you were born, we stopped burning coal because we wanted to actually stop doing that, and we wanted to also have cleaner air. So it made the air cleaner for us to breathe, and all these kind of extra benefits happened when we stopped burning coal. And we had to instead start getting electric cars and using electricity for stoves. And so we had to mine copper to replace that. But this is a big part of the whole transition now, the whole way the world is changing to try and keep it from getting too much warmer.
Have you heard about nuclear fusion?
Yes, so nuclear energy is one of the things that we're now using also for our electricity. Lots of places around the world. Oh.
Isn't fusion
Yes.
better than fission?
Yeah, so there's fusion as a source of potential electricity, but we're not there yet as a way to turn on our light bulbs.
How about hydrogen as an energy source?
It could be good. There's lots of different ways that we can get electricity and that we can get fuels, and any of them that don't involve burning those old plants and those old trees and coal are great. They're part of the path to get there.
Oh, I heard about biofuel. Is that a good alternative?
There are places where it could work also. Again, anything that's new, if you're able to grow something right now, and that takes that carbon dioxide out of the air, and then if you burn that, so say if you grow a plant and then you burn it, that could be a biofuel, and it's not adding in the same sense that those old plants were. Um, so it can be also part of the path to getting off of coal, but it's a little bit more complex. It can be a tougher way of getting there too for some people. So this is the last stop. This is a headdress made from macaw feathers of the Kayapo. So people lived in the Amazon. And I wanted to end the climate change tour here because another thing that we're doing as we try and respond to the world being warmer than it used to be is that we're trying to re-engage with the way we connect to nature, the way we connect to the environment. And for instance, here in Toronto, we're doing some really amazing things. We've actually redesigned the whole mouth of a river, the Don River. I don't know if you've ever seen the Don River. Sometimes you see it from the subway going over, but when I was a kid, I was really terrified of touching the Don River's water. I was scared of going down there. It's not easy to get down there. But the city is now making it and working with local First Nations to actually make it a place that's culturally connected to nature. And one of the most exciting things about climate change right now is that we're seeing that there's better ways to actually live in touch with nature and actually getting closer to our environments and changing the way our cities are even built to actually sort of and working with Indigenous people with their knowledge to get there. So there's a lot of really positive things that are happening. And it's exciting because when I was your age, none of this was even imaginable. So it's pretty cool for me to now see it, see some of these changes happening that I couldn't have imagined.
Wait, we're going to figure everything out by going back in history?
Yeah, it helps. There's a lot to learn from history.
So the First Nation people have some really good answers?
Absolutely. They have so much knowledge we can learn from, and so many ways of actually just living with our environment that we can learn from that make us more capable of actually surviving climate change and thriving and having a better life.
Cool! Wow, that was so informative. Thanks so much for taking the time with me to show me around.
Thanks for coming. It was a lot of fun.
Hmm?
Whoa.